Hey there y'all, welcome here again to this AI Learning's YouTube channel. Today I'll be talking a bit about functions in Python. You see, in the context of programming, a function is a named sequence of statements that performs a computation. When you define a function, you specify the name and sequence of statements. Later you can call this function by name. Before learning about functions, it is fair to ask, why do we need to know about functions in the first place? It may not be clear why it is worth the trouble to divide a program into functions now, but there are several reasons for it. Creating a new function gives you an opportunity to name a group of statements, which makes your program easier to read and debug. Functions can make a program smaller by eliminating repetitive code. Later, if you make a change, you only have to make it in one place. Dividing a long program into functions allows you to debug the parts one at a time and then assemble them into a working whole, like an ensemble of instruments. Well-designed functions are often useful for many programs. Once you write and debug one, you can reuse it. So let's start with it, shall we? But before I begin, you must always remember that everything in Python is an object. It may not make sense at the moment what on earth is an object, and that is absolutely fine. And don't worry about it, I will talk about objects in detail in a separate video, but until that I will tell you all the required things about objects for the task at hand. There are two types of functions in Python. Those are built-in functions and user-defined functions. You see, functions are these blocks of code that contains some code which is sitting there to perform some task when it is required to do so. So let me break that down for you. You can imagine functions as a block which contains some pre-written code, and that code will perform some duty. Now this code that is pre-written on this basis, the entire universe of function is divided into two parts, that is, built-in functions and user-defined functions. If the code is written by you, the user, the developer, then it's called user-defined function. But if the code is written by the Python developers, by which I mean when you install Python onto your system, you also download some modules which contain those code chunks and are sitting there to be called. They come built in with Python so that you don't have to write it, you just have to use it. Hence they're called built-in functions. The most popular built-in function in my opinion is the print function. The way to write a print function is this. Python developers were kind enough to write a bunch of functions that are frequently used so that we as developers or users of Python just need to use them. Some of the most common built-in functions are math functions, which to use, you import the math library, the type function to find out the type of an object. Let me just elaborate more on the math function which I just mentioned. Python has a math module that provides most of the familiar mathematical functions. A module is a file that contains a collection of related functions. See, before we can use the functions in a module, we have to import it with an import statement, something like this, import math. These statements create a module object named math. The module object contains the functions and variables defined in the module. To access one of the functions, you have to specify the name of the module and the name of the function separated by a dot or a period. Both are the same thing. This format, that's why it's called a dot notation. Look at this piece of code. Ratio equals signal par divided by noise par, and decibels equals 10 into math.log base 10 ratio, and as a parameter we insert a ratio. This example uses math.log10 to compute a signal to noise ratio in decimals, assuming that, of course, signal par and noise par are defined. And obviously noise par can't be 0. The math module also provides log, which computes logarithms base e. Now enough with built-in functions. Now let's talk a bit about user-defined functions. To tell the computer you're about to create a function of your own, just write def at the beginning of the line. Def is neither a command nor a function, it is a keyword. Then you can type the name of the function you'll use. For instance, simple, as we'll create a very simple function. Then we can add a pair of parentheses. Technically, within these parentheses, you could place the parameters of the function if it requires you to have any. It is no problem to have a function with 0 parameters. This is the case with the function we are creating right now. To proceed, don't miss to put a colon after the name of the function. Here we are going to make a function which accepts no parameters. The body of the function tells to simply print, I'm inside the simple function. So now this function has been defined. To use it, you just have to call it like this. It's fairly simple, right? Now let's define a function which accepts some parameters. You can think of parameters as some sort of placeholders that will hold whatever values are passed when they're called. Didn't understand? Don't worry, let me walk you through it. Let's say we want to make a function that, let's say, does something very simple. Let's say it adds 2 numbers. So what you're seeing on your screen right now is the code that I have written already to save some time. Don't worry, it's very simple to understand. Here, x and y are 2 placeholders which will accept any value as long as they're numbers and will return after performing the addition. To use it, you simply call them and pass the value of the placeholders. Here the value of x becomes 5 and the value of y becomes 6. And there you get the output. Pretty neat, right? 11. Now you have completely understood the basics of functions in Python. Unlike other compiled languages, you can pass an integer, let's say 5, and a floating number, let's say 6.4, and call it, because Python, as we all know it, is an interpreted language and it will work. So that's it. If you've liked the video, I encourage you to hit the like button and subscribe and hit the notification bell to be updated when I upload the next video. Till next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and keep studying. Cheers!